The rain hammered down on the asphalt, washing the late afternoon street in a slick, dark mirror. Thunder rumbled, a deep, resonant growl that matched the engines idling outside the clubhouse. The Bandidos MC chapter house, a squat, formidable building with tinted windows and a chain-link fence, was not a place people visited casually. It was a fortress, a den of outlaws according to the local papers and the perpetual frowns of the police chief. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale beer, motor oil, and the quiet camaraderie of men who had chosen a life outside the lines. Big Dog, the chapter president, a man whose face looked carved from granite and whose hands looked like they could crush bricks, was leaning over a worn map, discussing logistics for an upcoming run with his sergeant-at-arms, Ghost. The conversation was low, punctuated by the clink of pool balls from the far corner. Outside, the world was wet, loud, and indifferent. Inside, it was controlled, contained, and ruthlessly loyal. Suddenly, the heavy metal door, usually guarded with meticulous severity, burst open. Not kicked in, not barged through by a rival or law enforcement, but pushed with frantic, uncoordinated desperation. Standing in the doorway, framed by the pouring rain and the flash of distant lightning, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. He was soaking wet, shivering violently, and his small chest was heaving with breathless sobs. His clothes were thin, dirty, and torn at the knee, clinging to his slender frame. He looked like a creature running from a forest fire, eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. He didn't look at the pool table, or the bar, or the imposing figures who instantly ceased their activities to stare at him. He fixed his gaze solely on Big Dog, and then he ran. He didn't stop, didn't hesitate, just scrambled across the concrete floor, his wet sneakers squeaking, until he stood right in front of the president's heavy leather boots. The silence that fell was absolute. Ghost slowly placed his cue down, the click echoing in the sudden void. Every single man in that room, men who had faced down riots, brawls, and jail time without flinching, was frozen by the raw, desperate sight of the child. Big Dog didn't move. He simply lowered his massive head and looked at the boy, Leo. Leo's face was streaked with mud and tears, and his breath came in ragged gasps. He didn't have the strength left to cry loudly. Only small, heartbreaking whimpers escaped him. He clutched his hands into small fists. And then he finally spoke, his voice a terrified whisper that nonetheless cut through the silence like broken glass. "Please," he choked out, his eyes begging. "Please help me. My stepfather, he locks me in the basement." The effect of those simple words was seismic. The tension in the room didn't ease, it solidified, turning from surprise to a cold, hard anger. Big Dog reached out, his hand moving slowly, deliberately, until his fingers rested lightly on the boy's shoulder. The touch was impossibly gentle for a man of his size. "What's your name, son?" Big Dog asked, his voice rougher than usual, a low, gravelly sound. "Leo," the boy whispered, flinching slightly at the deep sound. "Leo, tell me everything," Big Dog commanded, pulling up a chair and gesturing for the boy to sit. He ignored the furious, concerned looks of his brothers. They knew what this meant. A child running to them, the perceived monsters, for sanctuary from a real one. This wasn't a petty turf war or a drunken bar fight. This was a line they would not allow to be crossed. This was sacred. Leo, emboldened by the sudden, unexpected safety he felt in the presence of these enormous, fearsome men, started his story. He spoke of the basement, dark, cold, and smelling of damp earth. He spoke of the padlock, the hours that stretched into eternal nights, and the fear that never left. He spoke of his mother, distant, afraid, and seemingly paralyzed by her new husband, a man named Victor, who had moved into their lives 6 months prior and slowly turned their home into a prison. Victor, Leo explained, was a neighborhood watch captain, the irony of which was not lost on the hardened men listening. A pillar of the community, according to the PTA and the local church bulletin. But behind the veneer of respectability, he was a petty tyrant whose favorite tool of control was fear and isolation, directed primarily at the helpless child he now considered an unwelcome burden. The men listened, silent, their faces shifting from stern detachment to a unified, grim resolve. They weren't police. They didn't operate by legal codes or warrants. They operated by a different kind of code: protection of the weak, loyalty above all, and an ancient, brutal form of justice when the system failed. And in this moment, the system had failed Leo catastrophically. The fact that the boy had bypassed everyone, teachers, neighbors, even the official law enforcement, and run directly to the outlaws, spoke volumes about the depth of his desperation and perhaps the unique reputation of the Bandidos. A reputation that, in its own twisted way, suggested they were the only ones truly outside the reach of Victor's respected status. They were the shadows who feared no light. Big Dog let Leo finish. When the boy concluded his harrowing account, he looked up, tears finally spent, with a fragile glimmer of hope. Big Dog nodded slowly. He didn't offer platitudes or promises of calling the authorities. He looked at Ghost, and Ghost knew. "Get the brothers ready," Big Dog said, his voice flat and deadly. "No colors, no cuts, just clean bikes and clean faces. We're going for a ride." He looked back at Leo, pulling a clean dry cloth from the bar to gently wipe the mud from the boy's face. "Leo," he said, "you came to the right place. We protect our own. And right now, kid, you are ours." The simple declaration was a promise, a bond forged in the misery of a child's terror and the fierce, protective instinct of men often labeled as monsters. The planning was swift, surgical, and silent. They needed to move before Victor realized Leo was gone. They needed to find the evidence, secure the mother, and most importantly, ensure Leo never had to fear the dark basement again. They weren't heroes. They were just men who understood that sometimes you had to break the law to uphold a deeper, more profound justice. They were the Bandidos, and a debt had been incurred. The time for talking was over. The time for action was now. The roar of engines was about to replace the sound of the storm. The ride to Leo's house was a silent, grim procession. 6 motorcycles, clean and stripped of the typical flashy chrome and roaring pipes, moved through the quiet suburban streets like dark, purposeful ghosts. The men, dressed in plain leather jackets and dark jeans, blended into the evening, their faces hard and focused. Big Dog rode point, his mind already 3 steps ahead, anticipating the confrontation. They knew the risk. They were moving against a man shielded by the respectability of his lies, on a mission fueled only by a child's testimony. Legally, they were trespassing and potentially committing assault. But to them, the stakes were moral, not legal. They were reclaiming a small life from a quiet evil. They pulled up 2 streets away from the address, parking their bikes precisely and silently behind a line of dense bushes. They approached the house on foot. It was a perfectly maintained home, manicured lawn, a fresh coat of paint, a small American flag waving obediently next to the porch light, the kind of place where nightmares were supposed to be impossible. Ghost, who was smaller and quicker, scaled the back fence with the agility of a jungle cat and scouted the perimeter. He found the basement door, a heavy, steel-plated hatch hidden discreetly under a deck. The gleam of a large new padlock confirmed Leo's story instantly. Ghost gave a single, tight whistle, and the rest of the crew moved in. Big Dog approached the front door with 2 of his most level-headed enforcers, Hammer and Snake. The plan was simple: confront Victor and secure Leo's mother, while the rest of the crew handled the physical evidence. Big Dog hammered on the door, a slow, deep, rhythmic pounding that didn't sound like a friendly visit. It sounded like consequence. Victor answered, looking slightly annoyed, holding a glass of iced tea. He was exactly as Leo described, a man of medium height, neatly dressed in a polo shirt, radiating an air of smug control. His annoyance quickly curdled into a mix of shock and poorly concealed panic when he registered the size and intent of the men on his porch. "Can I help you?" Victor asked, his voice strained, trying to mask the tremor of fear. "You're Victor, right?" Big Dog's voice was deep, devoid of threat, but radiating absolute authority. "We're here about Leo." Victor tried to shut the door immediately, but Hammer's massive boot was already wedged into the frame. "You have no right to be here. I'm calling the police," Victor stammered, his facade crumbling. "Go ahead," Big Dog said, pushing the door open, the 3 men stepping inside the pristine living room. "We're not going anywhere. In the confrontation that followed, Victor maintained his pathetic denial, calling the boy a troubled liar and the men gang thugs. But Big Dog didn't argue. He knew that the confrontation was only a distraction. Upstairs, they found Leo's mother, Maria. She was sitting stiffly on the edge of the sofa, looking shell-shocked and pale. The fear in her eyes was palpable, a testament to Victor's emotional abuse. Snake, who had a daughter Leo's age, knelt beside her, speaking in a low, reassuring voice. He didn't accuse her. He simply presented the facts. Your son ran for his life, Maria. He ran to us. Victor has been locking him in the basement. Seeing the gentle concern on the face of the fearsome-looking man and realizing her son was safe, broke her silence. Tears streamed down her face and she nodded, admitting weakly, "I was too afraid. He threatened to take him away from me." That admission was all they needed. Meanwhile, back at the basement hatch, Ghost and the others had gotten to work. They didn't use brute force, which would draw attention. They used specialized tools, quickly and professionally picking the high-grade lock Victor had installed. The heavy hatch groaned open, revealing a set of dark wooden stairs leading down. The air that wafted up was cold and musty. Downstairs, they found a small corner of the room dedicated to Leo's imprisonment. A thin, threadbare blanket, a bucket, and a single flickering utility light bulb. It was evidence starker than any written report, proof of systematic abuse and neglect. They quickly photographed the area with high-resolution cameras, gathering irrefutable proof of the crime. The entire operation was fast, precise, and conducted with a solemn professionalism that defied their reputation. They were executing their own brand of justice, with surgical efficiency. Upstairs, Big Dog ended the standoff. He didn't strike Victor. He didn't need to. He simply played the recording Ghost had sent to his encrypted phone. Maria's tearful admission, followed by Victor's horrified realization that they had been downstairs. "Maria is packing a bag, Victor," Big Dog announced, his eyes cold. "She's leaving with Leo. Tonight. And we have photos and her statement. You're respected in this town, right? Imagine the headlines when the Bandidos MC exposes the upstanding neighborhood watch captain for locking a child in a cellar. You call the cops, we call the press and the child services. You disappear tonight, and maybe this goes quietly to the police instead of being splashed across every paper. Your choice." Victor, seeing his carefully constructed life collapsing around him, was utterly defeated. His power came from respectability, and Big Dog had threatened to strip it away, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He stumbled away, defeated, his silence a final, desperate plea for a shred of dignity. Within the hour, Leo was safely back at the clubhouse, wrapped in a warm blanket, sipping hot chocolate, surrounded by big, gruff men who now looked like giant, awkward teddy bears. Maria was there too, finally seeing her son safe, a burden of fear lifted from her shoulders. The Bandidos didn't call the police immediately. They ensured Maria and Leo had a safe, secret place to stay for the night, connecting them with a discreet network they used for families in crisis, a network entirely unknown to the authorities. Only then, once the victims were secure, did Big Dog make the anonymous call, dropping a carefully constructed package of irrefutable evidence, including Maria's signed statement and the photos, at the precinct door before the morning. They didn't seek credit. They didn't need the spotlight. They simply upheld their unique code. They saved the innocent, and they ensured that the real monster would face justice, not from them, but from the system he had hidden behind. The Bandidos MC rode back out into the night, just a few dark shapes on the road, leaving behind a terrified, exposed villain and a rescued boy who knew against all logic that his saviors wore patches and leather, not badges. The world would still call them outlaws, but for one mother and one small boy, they were the truest heroes they had ever known.